Breakout or breakdown, the night the prison doors opened by mistake. The alarm lights flashed red across the concrete walls, and the sound that followed was something no one in Clinton Correctional Facility had ever heard before, the deep metallic clunk of every cell door unlocking at once. It was past midnight in Dannemora, New York, and for a few unreal seconds, hundreds of inmates in one of America's toughest prisons stood frozen in disbelief. Then chaos erupted. Men poured into the narrow corridors, yelling, pushing, and running toward any direction that looked like freedom. Some bolted for the outer gates, others took the chance to settle old scores right there inside the cell block. Guards on the night shift scrambled, shouting into radios that weren't answering fast enough. The prison's steel doors, the ones that should have been impossible to open, had all clicked open together because of a systems failure deep in the security control room. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't planned. It was the kind of accident that every correctional officer fears but never expects to happen. One wrong command, one software glitch, and a place built to lock people in had suddenly unlocked itself. The control tower was in shock. Red lights blinked across the board. The officer on duty, a man named Gerald Thomas, frantically pressed the override button again and again, but nothing worked. The system wasn't responding. For 2 long minutes, the prison's heart, its electronic locking system, was dead. Inmates were shouting, "The doors are open, let's go!" Some ran to the outer yard, others hid, not sure if it was a trap. A few used the moment to pass messages or contraband. Everyone inside felt the same thing, freedom, if only for a few seconds. Down the main corridor, 2 men, Richard Matt and David Sweat, recognized the opportunity faster than anyone else. Both were serving life sentences for murder. They'd been talking for months about finding a way out, and now fate had given them a window they never could have planned. They bolted toward the maintenance tunnel entrance, hearts pounding, knowing that even seconds could change everything. Outside, sirens began to wail as the control room finally rebooted. The system re-engaged, and doors slammed shut again with a thunderous echo. But by then, the damage was done. 2 men were missing from count. Guards sprinted across the yard, flashlights slicing through the darkness, while supervisors tried to understand what had just happened. Within minutes, the prison was on total lockdown. Spotlights scanned the perimeter fences, and dogs were released. But somewhere out there, beyond the razor wire, the 2 escapees had already slipped into the cold Adirondack night. The warden arrived within the hour, his face pale and jaw tight. He'd worked 30 years in the system and never imagined seeing something like this. "How the hell did all the doors open?" he demanded. The technician muttered something about a power surge or a system glitch, but no one could explain how a high-security prison had turned itself inside out.
By dawn, every news station in America was running the headline, "Massive security breach at Clinton Prison. 2 killers on the run." Reporters swarmed the small town of Dannemora, turning it into the center of a national manhunt. The public wanted answers. How could one of the most secure prisons in New York State have let this happen? Inside the facility, guards whispered about sabotage, that maybe someone inside had helped trigger the failure. Others thought it was pure bad luck, but everyone knew one thing for sure: the system had failed, and now the entire state was paying the price. As helicopters thundered overhead and police checkpoints went up across the region, a chilling realization spread among staff. If the doors had stayed open for even 1 minute longer, dozens more could have escaped. The escape of Matt and Sweat had already thrown the whole place into panic, but no one yet knew that what had happened wasn't just an accident. Someone inside the prison knew exactly how the system worked and how to make it break. And that meant this wasn't just a breakout. It might be the start of a breakdown of the entire prison system itself. The sun rose over the gray walls of Clinton Correctional Facility, but it brought no comfort. News helicopters hovered overhead, their blades chopping through the cold morning air. Reporters camped outside the gates, shouting questions at officers who refused to answer. Inside the prison, every corridor echoed with tension. Guards stood shoulder to shoulder doing emergency head counts while the warden's voice barked over the loudspeakers, demanding order. Richard Matt and David Sweat were gone. What no one could figure out was how. There were no broken locks, no smashed doors, no signs of forced escape. It was as if the two men had simply vanished when the security system failed. The incident left the staff shaken and scared. If the system could unlock itself once, could it happen again? Investigators from the New York State Police and the Department of Corrections poured into the prison before noon. They started pulling records, interviewing guards, and replaying every second of the surveillance footage from that night. But the footage stopped at the exact moment the power surge hit. 7 minutes that changed everything. Meanwhile, word spread quickly through the prison yard. Inmates talked in hushed voices about the glitch, some calling it divine intervention, others calling it an inside job. Rumors grew wilder by the hour, that a guard had helped the escapees, that someone in maintenance had disabled the alarms, that the entire system had been set up to fail.
Out in the small town of Dannemora, fear began to creep in. People locked their doors and checked their sheds, worried that the fugitives might be hiding nearby. Local schools were shut down and roadblocks went up across Clinton County. The manhunt was on. Hundreds of officers searched through thick woods, old cabins, and drainage tunnels. Helicopters scanned the forests with heat sensors. They found nothing but footprints, leading deeper into the wilderness. Matt and Sweat were skilled. They had studied every inch of the prison's blueprints during their time in the workshop. They knew where to run and how to disappear. Back inside the prison, a name started circulating among investigators. Joyce Mitchell. She worked in the tailor shop supervising both escapees. Friendly, talkative, and often too close to the inmates, she'd been warned before about crossing boundaries. When questioned, she acted nervous, avoiding eye contact. At first, she denied knowing anything, but cracks in her story began to show. Detectives searched her phone records. They found late-night calls and secret messages to both Matt and Sweat. One message from Matt read, "It's almost time." That was the break investigators needed. It wasn't just a systems error, someone had helped them get out. By day 3, the governor himself, Andrew Cuomo, arrived at the prison. Cameras followed him as he walked through the dark tunnels where investigators believed the two killers had crawled to freedom. At one point, he turned to the press and said, "These are dangerous men. This was not just a mistake, this was a major breach of security." The public demanded answers. Talk shows called it the New York Shawshank. People were glued to their TVs as police expanded the search zone. But deep in the Adirondack woods, the escapees were surviving on canned food, stolen clothes, and sheer determination. Matt, the older of the two, was the leader, manipulative and daring. Sweat was quieter, more cautious, but equally dangerous. The plan had worked better than either of them imagined. Still, their freedom came with fear. Helicopters circled above day and night. Roads were blocked. Every cop in the state was hunting them. Back at Clinton, Joyce Mitchell finally broke down. After hours of questioning, she confessed. She had given the men tools hidden in frozen hamburger meat, saw blades, chisels, and drill bits, all smuggled past security. The so-called systems error that opened the doors, investigators now believed it wasn't random at all. A power line had been tampered with from inside the maintenance area. Someone had triggered the failure on purpose. The more the investigators dug, the worse it got. Other officers admitted to sleeping on duty, ignoring alarms, and failing to check tunnels that hadn't been inspected in years. The truth was ugly. Clinton Correctional Facility, one of the oldest prisons in New York, was falling apart from the inside, and the escape had exposed every crack. As night fell on day 6 of the manhunt, a call came in from a local farmer. He'd found a campsite, leftover food, cigarette butts, and a torn prison uniform. The search teams raced toward the woods. They moved silently under the cover of darkness, flashlights sweeping through the trees. Then, one of the dogs started barking wildly. Officers raised their weapons and advanced through the brush, hearts pounding. For a moment, it felt like the chase was over, but when they reached the campsite, the fugitives were gone. Only a fire still burning and a note written on cardboard.
"Catch us if you can." The hunt was far from over, and for the first time, the question everyone was asking, was this really an escape or a complete breakdown of New York's prison system? The forests of upstate New York had turned into a war zone. Police checkpoints dotted every road, Helicopters roared overhead, and hundreds of officers moved through the woods with night vision goggles and search dogs. The escape of Richard Matt and David Sweat had become the biggest manhunt New York had seen in decades. By the second week, everyone was exhausted. Officers had searched over 20 square miles, swamps, barns, fields, and old cabins. Locals were on edge. Some claimed to hear footsteps at night. Others said they saw movement near their farms. The tension in the air was thick, and every shadow felt dangerous. Governor Cuomo called it a full-scale breakdown of security. The headlines agreed. The story had gone national. Prison break exposes flaws in New York's system. For weeks, Americans watched in disbelief as two convicted killers stayed one step ahead of the police. Then, finally, there was a lead. A cabin owner near Owl's Head, about 20 miles from the prison, reported that his hunting cabin had been broken into. Food was missing, along with maps, a rifle, and a pack of ammunition. Investigators rushed to the scene and confirmed fingerprints. They belonged to Richard Matt. The fugitives were still alive and armed. State troopers and federal marshals closed in. Every roadblock tightened, and sharpshooters were positioned in the woods. The pressure was on. Meanwhile, inside the prison walls, the truth continued to unravel. More officers were being questioned, and the scale of negligence became impossible to hide. Records showed guards had skipped rounds, left gates unlocked, and ignored inspection warnings for years. It wasn't just one mistake, it was a chain of them. The system had failed from top to bottom. Joyce Mitchell, now under arrest, wept in her interviews. She admitted she was supposed to meet Matt and Sweat after their escape, planning to drive them to Mexico. But when the moment came, she panicked. "I couldn't do it," she told investigators. Her hesitation had forced the two men to flee on foot, straight into the wilderness. Days passed. The manhunt grew quieter. Officers began to think the fugitives might have died from hunger or exposure. But on June 26, 2015, everything changed. A police team near Malone heard gunshots echo through the trees. They followed the sound and found Richard Matt, lying in the grass with a rifle beside him. He had been shot and killed by a Border Patrol agent after refusing to surrender. The news hit hard. One fugitive down, one still on the run. David Sweat, the last man standing, kept moving. He was determined not to be caught. For 2 days, officers tracked footprints and drops of blood leading south. Then, on June 28th, just 2 miles from the Canadian border, a state trooper spotted him running through a field. "Stop! Don't move!" the trooper shouted.
Sweat didn't stop. 2 shots rang out. He fell to the ground, wounded but alive. The chase was finally over. When officers cuffed him, he was pale and shivering, barely able to speak. "I just wanted to feel free," he whispered. After 23 days on the run, his dream of freedom had ended in the mud beside a country road. News of the capture spread across the nation. The manhunt had cost New York nearly $20 million and left the state's correctional system under fire. Investigations revealed layers of corruption, complacency, and outdated technology. The entire system was shaken to its core. In the following months, prison staff were fired, security systems were rebuilt, and stricter policies were put in place. Clinton Correctional Facility would never operate the same way again. But in the small town of Dannemora, scars remained. Locals who had spent weeks living in fear still double-checked their locks at night. Guards who had worked those long days still woke up to the sound of phantom alarms. For many, the escape wasn't just about 2 killers running free. It was a symbol, a warning that even the most secure systems can collapse when people stop paying attention. As one investigator later said, it wasn't just a breakout, it was a breakdown of trust, of discipline, and of the belief that these walls were unshakable. The prison doors had opened by mistake once, but what came out that night was more than just 2 inmates.
It was the truth about how fragile control really is, and how chaos, once unleashed, doesn't stay behind bars. And that's the story of one of the most shocking prison escapes in modern U.S. history, the night the doors of Clinton Correctional Facility opened by mistake. What began as a simple glitch turned into a full-blown manhunt that exposed corruption, carelessness, and the fragile line between order and chaos inside America's prisons. Sometimes it only takes one small failure, one wrong command to bring an entire system to its knees. If you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life crime stories from across the United States. Every week, we uncover the true events, the hidden details, and the human moments behind America's most unbelievable crimes. Because in the world of true crime, the truth is always stronger than fiction.